All right, hello class. Thank you to your professor Aparna for inviting me to talk to you guys. I appreciate it. I have never done anything like this before. That is, be in my office by myself and just kind of look into my computer and talk for a few minutes. But you know what? I'll give it a whirl, and hopefully, I can share some of the things I learned in my more than 30 years of experience in the broadcast television industry. I want to break this down into a few sections. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about myself, how and why I got into broadcast journalism and the television business. I want to share with you my journey, how I started as a page at the Burbank NBC studios, and then kind of made my way up to my dream job, which was the executive producer of the Today Show. And then I want to just sort of give you some thoughts that I think might be helpful, some lessons I may have learned or I did learn along the way, and maybe it'll help you as you guys try to navigate your careers in this industry, which is a great one. And then at the end, I'm gonna take a few of your questions. Many of you have submitted some questions, and I will answer all of them, and hopefully shed some more light on how you too can make it in this crazy business. But I want to start, as I said, talking about my career and how I got into the industry. I grew up in California, Northern California, and from a very young age, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and that was to work in the television industry. I was fascinated by television. I'm sure many of you guys are as well and have been for a long time. But anytime my parents said, "Where do you want to go on vacation?" I'd always say LA, because I just wanted to be a part of that world, the production world. I just wanted to see how television was made. And so that would be where we would end up a lot of the time, if I had my wishes. But I ended up going to college, of course, at UCLA. I graduated in communication studies, great school, great program, had a great time. Right out of college, I got my first job in the industry. I'd done a couple of internships while I was in college, but I got my first real job in the industry as I mentioned, a page at the NBC studios in Burbank. And basically it was a glorified tour guide job. I would give tours to the public of the studios. But there was also, you could also get assignments, and some of the shows they taped on the lot, and some of the assignments you could get is dealing with the audiences for Saved by the Bell. I'm sure some of you guys have heard of that show. Wheel of Fortune was taped on the lot at the time, and a show I really idolized, and that was The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And that was always my favorite assignment. I would get to either seat people in the audience, or you get to answer phones backstage, and Johnny Carson would walk by right before he went on and sometimes wink at you, but you were not allowed to engage him. I remember them telling me that very specifically. You're not allowed to talk to Johnny, but it was just cool being in his presence, and I absolutely love that show. Anyway, I did that job for about 6 months, and then one day, I was sitting in the Page Lounge, a little area with a couch we would hang out in between tours, and someone slipped these little notes into our mailboxes, and I immediately grabbed the note as it was placed in my box, and it was a note from a manager at the Today Show saying the Burbank offices, the Los Angeles bureau of the Today Show, was looking for a production assistant. And my heart started to pound. I was like, that is my dream job. I would love to work at the Today Show, because that was my other favorite show at the time. And I called the manager right away. I was the first to call, and he was very nice, but he said, "You know what, I'm sorry, there's been some confusion. We thought the current production assistant was leaving, but he just told me he's actually going to stay. So with the job just isn't available." And I said, "Okay, well, let me know if anything changes. Appreciate that." I hung up the phone, and I was like crushed. So I made a decision to just go ahead and go up to the office and meet this guy. And I took the elevator up to the 3rd floor, and I just said, "Does anyone know who this manager is?" And he came up to me, and I shook his hand. I said, "I know the job's not available. I get that. I just wanted you to put a face to a name and just say hello. And if anything changes, please let me know. And he said, come into my office. So I went into his office, and he ended up interviewing me on the spot and then giving me the job. I mean, there was just a lot of confusion over this guy leaving. It turns out he was going to at least take a year off to go travel or something like that. So I got the job, and I was thrilled. And it was an entry level job. I would be sending FedExes for people. I was making phone calls. I did anything and everything. But a few months into it, I actually started writing segments for the show. I offered to do it. They needed extra help, and I literally started writing segments for the anchors at the time, which were Brian Gumbel and Jane Pauley, and then Deborah Norville, and eventually Katie Couric, all with Brian. And it was a dream come true. And as I rose to the ranks, I did some really cool assignments. I went to the Olympics in Atlanta. That was my first Olympics, which would turn out, I ended up doing 9 in my career. I went to Budapest, where we interviewed Madonna when she was doing a film called Evita. I had met countless celebrities, from Gwyneth Paltrow to Jerry Seinfeld, just you name it, I got to meet them. And I covered some really big stories. I covered the LA riots, which has happened in the wake of the Rodney King verdict. I covered both O.J. Simpson trials. I was actually at the courthouse when he was found not guilty, standing right outside the doors. But that was my life for a long time, for many years, covering that trial, both the criminal trial and the civil trial. And it was just a dream job. I traveled to Manitoba, Canada, and I did a story on a photographer who shot photos of polar bears. I went to another place in Canada where I did a story on how they were killing the harp seals, baby harp seals, for their pelts. And it was a good time. I loved being a field producer. And at one point, the then executive producer of the show called me up and said, do you ever want to come to New York and be a manager? And I literally said to him, no, because I'm having so much fun, going out and shooting stories and meeting these people and doing all these things and traveling. And he's like, I respect that. You let me know when you're ready. And about 2 years later, I said, you know what? I'm ready. I want to be a manager. So it took a while, but he eventually, this was Jeff Zucker, who now happens to run CNN, ended up running NBC Universal for several years too, before that. But he brought me to New York. I became a manager. It was a very different experience. It was a new challenge. I appreciated the new challenge. But I have to be honest with you, I miss traveling. So if and when you end up being a segment producer or just realize that's the best part. That's fun. But it was time for me to sort of grow in my career. And I always had this fascination with the control room. And that was my real goal in coming to New York, is to be able to run a control room at some point. So I was in New York. That was in 1999. And then a couple years later, I was assigned to run the weekend edition of the Today Show with a woman named Soledad O'Brien and a man named David Bloom, who sadly passed away while he was covering the war in Iraq. So that was difficult, obviously. But anyway, I ran the weekend Today Show, and then I went back to the weekday Today Show, and I was the number 2. And I'll be honest with you guys, I got passed over a couple of times, and it was very, very frustrating and disappointing, because I didn't think the people who got the job were as qualified as me. I had worked there for decades, and that's probably going to happen in your careers. You're probably at some point going to get passed over, but I'm telling you, stick it out, be patient. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And years later, I ended up getting my dream job, which was to be the executive producer of the Today Show. And it was amazing. And again, just met fascinating people, covered every major news story, met every single president alive, went to the White House several times, just did a lot of important, cool things running a show as big as that. So Were there challenges? Yeah, it's a high pressure job. You deal with high paid anchors who are used to getting their way, and working with them is part of the job. And it was a challenge sometimes, but we also had a lot of fun along the way. I went to a lot of really cool Today Show concerts. You name it, I got to experience that. And yeah, it was quite a journey. And I worked in total on the Today Show for 32 years. And then I decided it was time to do something else. And that was about two years ago. So I wanted to, I felt like I had done my time. It really is all consuming when you have a job like that. And I wanted to spend more time with my family. And I just was ready to kind of take it down a notch and see what else was out there and see what else I could do. And I'm going to talk to you about the project I'm working on with Aparna towards the end of this talk. But yeah, that's my journey, and it was great. And I would just suggest to you all that the number one most important thing to consider in your career choices is to do what you love. I loved that job from start to finish. I pinched myself every day walking into 30 Rock, walking into the control room, putting important content on the air, respecting the institution, the legendary institution that is the Today Show. Working with just brilliant people, the anchors, the reporters, the producers, the graphic artists, the audio engineers, the cameramen, like just, there's a reason why that show has been successful so long, and that is because of the people who work there. They are tireless, they are creative, they are smart, and I feel honored to have been at the helm for as long as I was there. All right, guys. Now some practical advice, some things that I've kind of learned along the way that might help you as you navigate the waters of broadcast journalism. The first piece of advice I have for all of you is just try to absorb everything. Try to read as much as possible, newspapers, websites, Twitter, TikTok, just try to inform yourself as much as possible, because the more you're informed, the more you'll be able to inform your audience. And you want to get as many different perspectives on the stories you're involved with as you can. So I would just strongly encourage you to just create a really big knowledge base and a big reading list of other broadcast journalists or other journalists, I should say. And then you can adapt your style to that. Second, write. I know this is a writing course that Aparna is teaching you right now. You got to be a strong writer if you're going to succeed in broadcast journalism. And it's different than print journalism or written journalism. What you want to be, other than completely accurate, of course, and get the facts right, that's the first priority. But the second is, in broadcast journalism, you want to be as conversational as possible, because it's mostly people reading your words, or you reading your own words, or reciting your own words for the camera. So you want to speak to your audience the way you'd speak to a human being. So that's kind of the trick with broadcast journalism. You don't want to overwrite. You want to keep it kind of conversational, simple, snappy, persuasive. And I know Aparna has been talking to you guys about a lot of this in this course. I would learn how to edit if you haven't already, because in the future, I don't think there will be editors versus reporters versus producers. They'll all be one. You've probably heard the term digital journalists. Those are journalists who can do it all, who can write, who can edit, who can report, who can sort of possess skills that in the past may have been three people involved in that. So I think it's important that everybody picks a good editing system and learns how to use it. This next one's an important one. Adapt. The world is changing. It will continue to change. When I started, the news cycle was 24 hours. You woke up in the morning, you got your news on the Today Show, you read your morning newspaper. The evening news would report many of the same stories, and then would all start over again the next day. It wasn't quite that simple, but something like that. These days, it's like 24 seconds. Every 24 seconds, there's a new tweet that might be newsworthy, or a new report, or a new post on a website. So the nature of how you gather information, how you report information, how content is shared is always changing, and just be prepared to adapt to those changes. The way broadcast journalism looks today is not the way it's going to look in a year, in 2 years, and in 20 years from now, when you're all hopefully gainfully employed in this industry. And the final thing is just enjoy. It's a great career. It's the reason you're studying this and you're working so hard to get into this field is because you have a passion for it. You want to inform people. You want to get facts correct, and you want to report them. We talked earlier about passion. Just you spend so much time on your career, probably more time than you do in your personal life. So if you're not enjoying it, then I feel bad for you. So just, you're choosing a really interesting, dynamic industry to go into. Appreciate that and try to enjoy it as much as possible. All right, time to have some fun. The Q&A portion of this lecture. Some of you submitted some really great questions, so I thought I'd answer all of them. Let's start with this one.
How do you handle all the pressure that comes with your job?
Yeah, you know what? It can be a lot of pressure. There are not a lot of industries where everything you do is seen by millions of people. So there is a lot of pressure, of course, to get it right. You get a lot of feedback from your audience, from your bosses, from your colleagues, from your family. People seem to all want to have an opinion about what you put on the air, about your work. That's fine. I get it. I listened to what everyone said. I heard the feedback, but I just tried not to let it get to me. And it's important that, obviously you spend a lot of time on your careers, but you need to have some balance. So, exercise as much as you can when you have the time. Try to be able to create or carve out some downtime where you're not just working. I've always thought that was very important. Hard to do sometimes, but in the end, it's a job, and it's a great one. And you just have to be careful not to make any mistakes, and just recognize you can't please everybody. There are always going to be critics, especially when you're working on something or working in a field that is so public. So I don't know. I hope that answered your question. Let's take another one.
What components go into picking and choosing who you interview? I don't know if that's really what TV journalism is, or if not, maybe you can give me some insight, because I'm still very new to the subject and all of the nuances, but I would still like to learn more about that. Thank you.
There are a lot of components that go into who you choose to interview for each particular story. I would say first and foremost is balance. You want to make sure that if there is more than one side to a story, that you try to present the different sides, and you need to find people who are articulate and can speak in sound bites, as they say, so that they're able to deliver a message in a succinct way, because you will learn in this industry that sometimes you have a minute and a half to tell a story, and you want to get as much information packed into that minute and a half. So you need to find interviewees who are able to present their perspective in as succinct a way as possible. So I would say, like I said, balance important, people who can speak succinctly, and people who have knowledge of the story, real in-depth knowledge of the subject you're trying to present.
Hi, Dan. Thank you for answering our questions. So what I want to ask is that how to process the first-hand information to make it into TV news.
That's actually a great question. Never go into a story with a foregone conclusion. You go out, you gather the information, and then you process it and you craft it into a story that is fair, that is accurate, and that as much as possible presents different perspectives. And you let the audience, you let the viewers decide for themselves what the conclusion should be.
How do you capture attention and increase viewership of an account or channel?
Not going to lie to you, growing your audience, retaining your audience, having as many eyeballs as possible on your particular show or website or whatever it is, whatever format you're broadcasting in is